Hi guys, so I'm continuing in a series of videos I'm making about identifying the narcissist, and today one characteristic I wanted to talk about is jumping ship. So narcissists have a pattern of jumping ship, and what I mean by that is they jump from one thing to the next, and they can be totally 100% seemingly all into something one day and the next day be all out and peace later, see you later, and just completely pull out and never see them again. And most of us are aware of this pattern in especially romantic relationships. So if we've been learning about narcissism, we know that there can be this pattern of the idealization phase or love bombing, and then the devalue and the discard. And we're familiar with that. I mean, that may even be how we came to know about narcissism because we experienced that and wanted to know what that was and why that happened. But it's not just in relationships that narcissists have this tendency. So they can also show this pattern in other ways as well. You may see that and I'm just going to give some examples. Let's talk about a work situation. They may jump from one project at work to the next, or even one position at work to the next. And it may seem like they're just all about something. So they latch onto something new at work, like a new project, and they seem like they're totally in and they're totally devoted and they're totally committed to it and over the top into it. And then after a while, it doesn't bring them as much satisfaction as they thought it would, and they start to get restless and they have to start looking for something new. So they have to find a new project to jump into. And so you may notice they're just jumping from one thing to the next, and it may be pretty dramatic, the way that they leave the past thing. Like they may not tie up loose ends. They may just jump out of one situation and into the next. And it just may not seem to fit or line up. You may notice something strange about it, about the way it's just so, there's just something so drastic about it. Or you may question, like, how can they be so into something one minute and then the next minute so completely out and on to the next thing? So you may notice this in a work situation. You may notice it. Let's give the example of a narcissist or a person who they have this consistent pattern of they talk about how they have these big plans of building their dream house. And so they dream about these plans and they're coming up with the blueprints and they're executing it. And like they build this house and all they can talk about is this new house that they're going to have and how it's the house they wanted for so long. And it's going to have, this beautiful kitchen. It's going to have this wraparound porch in the back with a beautiful view. And they commit so much time and energy and attention into this thing. And they do it and they move into the house. And then it's like a year later, they start talking about building a new house or moving out or moving somewhere else. And you may notice it and think that's a little odd, that they have this pattern of moving every 1 to 2 years. Because for most people, if you spend all that time and energy building your dream home, you're going to enjoy it for a while, right? Like most of us are going to want to stay and enjoy the fruit of our labor and enjoy it for a while. But the truth is, with a narcissist, they lose the freshness of it. The thing no longer has the ability to hold their attention or to feed their ego or to satisfy them in the same way. And so it's no different than how they are with relationships. Just like once they've landed a relationship, they may start to get dissatisfied and kind of start thinking about other people, or gosh, it would have been better if I was with this person, or look at this over here as a better situation. They can do that about anything. It doesn't have to be relationships. And it's because so much of what they're doing is out of a motivation of feeding their ego. And also because so much of what they're doing has to do with the fact that they do not self-reflect, and they don't look inwards, and if they don't deal with what's inside of themselves, and they're projecting it out, and they're externalizing that internal struggle that's going on inside of them. They externalize it. So instead of like self-reflecting where this dissatisfaction is coming from and going inwards and fixing what needs to be fixed on the inside, they have to try to fix it on the outside. So instead of saying, man, I moved into this new house, and yet again, I'm just dissatisfied with it, and it hasn't brought me the happiness I thought it would. Instead of then looking inside and saying, well, what's going on with me that I keep doing this, and why am I feeling so dissatisfied, and what do I need to look at here so I can get out of this pattern? Instead of doing that, they are externalizing everything. So they're starting to look at that house and say, this kitchen just doesn't have enough cupboard space for me to put everything in. This porch, there's too many mosquitoes back here. And they're just starting to pick at things externally and be dissatisfied with them, rather than looking internally and trying to fix what is causing them to feel so restless and so dissatisfied. So just some examples, you may see narcissists have this consistent pattern in their lives where they jump from one thing to the next, and they seem to be like totally all in one minute, and then it's like they're all out and they're on to the next thing. And I personally don't believe that this has to be like a pattern that exists in every area of their lives. I know some people think with a narcissist, they can never have like stable or long-term relationships, or they're constantly in every area of their life. They're unstable and moving from one thing to the next. I just think that depends on their level of functioning. And, I think that, it is possible for a narcissist to be in a 20-year marriage, but during that marriage to be going from job to job or moving from house to house. It just depends what the source is, what the external source that they're looking for to fill that internal emptiness or need that they have. They may look for it in different situations. So some may get it more from relationships than others. Some may get more of that. They may boost their ego more or feed their ego more through their job situation than they do through their marriage. So, just because you see a narcissist who can have long-term friendships, for example, or stay in a job for 10 years, that doesn't mean necessarily that they're not a narcissist, but I do think that they consistently will have this pattern of areas in their life where they're really restless. They grow dissatisfied with things, and they have to jump from one thing to the next. It just may be different situations. Like, it could be, for example, you might see them, and just, almost like how a teenager is about their identity. Like, I don't know, do you remember in middle school or high school, people would come to school and all of a sudden one day they're like, I'm a prep and I hang out with preppy people and I dress this certain way. And then the next day they might come back and they're like, I'm a punk rocker and look, I have a mohawk and I listen to this music. And they're kind of like going from one identity to the next. And that's normal at that phase of development because they're trying out different things. But we become more stable with that as we get older and who we are and figuring out who we are. But with the narcissist, they may still have some of those patterns where their identity kind of shifts from one thing to the next. Especially in certain areas. It may not be in every area, but you just may notice something a little off about it. Like, not understanding that switching from one thing to the next. Or I'll give another example. If it's a religious type scenario, they may be 1 minute totally into yoga and doing yoga retreats, and they're all into meditation, and like that's all they talk about and all that they're into. And then the next moment they might be into and it might be pretty extreme or drastic. Like they could be now they're like living off the land, and they're dressing like an Amish person, and they're wanting to make all their own food and have like 12 children. So that's an example, and that's pretty extreme, but sometimes it can be pretty extreme. Sometimes it can be pretty extreme where they seem like they draw all their identity from this one thing, but then a few years later, it's totally shifted to something else. So I don't know if that helps you think, but just something to be aware of. They're going to go from one thing to the next, trying to feed their egos, and they'll be eventually be dissatisfied with that next thing, and they'll have to drop it like a hot potato and latch onto something else new to try to give them that new sense of excitement, or because they're not dealing with internal stuff, they're looking for things externally. And they can do it in relationships. Yeah. Most of us are aware of that, but they can do it in other areas too. So something to kind of keep your eyes out for. And I hope that helps. We'll talk later. Bye.